Hello everyone, welcome back for another campaign diary. When last we left our heroes, right, it's time to get down to business, time to get down and play some D&D. So, let's get straight down to business. When last we left our heroes, you'll remember that in the last session, they had gone on the high seas after boarding ships on the way to the port city of Dax'an in Fritzolas' territory. Their mission to capture the city and remove a key piece of Fritzolas' war machine. At the start of this session, I explained that the heroes, this time we had Sonia, Hazel, and Sam as our crew, had reached the port city of Dax'an and were just floating just off from the port, outside of the reach of the ship's cannons. At this point, I had Admiral Yvonne explain to the players that they basically had two options. One, they could unleash a frontal assault upon the port, which would require them to defeat all the ships that were guarding the port, as well as take out the fort that was overlooking the port itself. Now, in case the players went with this option, I even created an entire system of how the ships would run, what the ship's health were, how it would work with, aiming and movement and firing, and such and such. And I had tested it out a couple times, and I was actually very proud of it. And in many ways, I had hoped the players would go with it. That way I would have an excuse to try it out. Unfortunately, they didn't. Instead, they went with the second option, which was to try and sneak around the fort, go around the outside of the port city, and then drop off the player characters, and then have the PCs work their way to the fort where they could try and capture the fort before Yvonne unleashed his assault on the port. I know, it's very confusing with port and fort, and I will do my best to enunciate such that you can understand. Well, the characters decided they wanted to try and sneak around. So I had them roll a stealth check. And I said, you're going to have to make 3 stealth checks as you guys sail the one ship around to try and sneak around the fort. Well, they made the first one, and then failed the second one. And I explained, you guys are sailing, and there's a loud creak, and you hear a shout from atop the fort. And you can then hear the sound of a cannon go off. And so I rolled for the attack of the fort's cannon, and it missed. And so I said, all right, guys, make your 3rd stealth check, which they succeeded. And I said, okay, how are you trying to escape? They said, we're going to sail in just close to the rocks. We're going to jump off. Players will swim to shore, and we'll let the ship then take off and go back to the others. I said, all right, that makes sense. That's a very valid thing. So sure enough, the ship goes away, kind of drawing the fire of the cannons while the player characters work their way. Now, in an attempt to add some drama, I said, okay, Admiral Yvonne, before dropping you off, explains that he plans to attack at dawn, basically, which is only in like 2 hours. And the players were like, all right. So when it had got to land it off after jumping off the ship, I explained, okay, guys, you now have a couple options. You can either try and climb up the rough terrain at a fast pace, or you can guys try and go around and hit the road, which leads from the city up to the fort. And I said, now, taking the road is easier, but it'll take longer. However, if you try and work your way up the mountain, you'll have to roll some skill checks, and you might not get there in time. And they were like, okay, so there's some tension. They said, we're going to go with the rough terrain. We're going to try and climb our way basically up the hill, up the kind of the cliffs to the fort. I said, all right. Because I had them roll some athletics checks. They had to climb up a rope to get to a cliff and using a grappling hook and such. And it added some tension, and I think the players kind of felt like, okay, there is a bit of a clock. However, there was never a huge, we gotta get here, we gotta get here, we gotta get here. And that, perchance, is my fault, but again, it was a new thing I was trying out, and I think it worked for being our first time. So to make it just outside the fort. And at that point, they're like, all right, what are we going to use as our excuse to get in? Hazel comes up with a great idea at this point. She says, I'm a bard, so I'm an entertainer sent by Fritzolas' high command to try and raise the morale of the troops. And I was like, okay, that sounds like a good idea. They're like, all right, how are you going to explain the presence of the other two? And Hazel says, well, Hazel's the muscle, she's kind of the guard, and Danny's the sorcerer, he's the guide. I was like, all right, that makes a lot of sense. That's fair. I'll give you guys advantage when you try and persuade people with that explanation. And like, all right. So they approach the guards at the front of the gates of the fort, and they explain who they are. And the guards say, all right, well, let us check in with the captain. And one of the guards ducks in, and he comes out a couple minutes later with this guy in full plate armor, and the captain's like, oh, okay. And he's like, now tell me your story again. And I had them roll again, and they once again had the advantage, plus Hazel's ridiculous persuasion, they're able to fool the captain, and they take him aside, and the captain says, all right, I'll call down most of the spare troops. So everybody from the barracks comes in, a couple of guys manning some of the cannons come down, and Hazel starts, I said, all right, Hazel, roll me a performance check. And she rolls incredibly high. It's not as, her modifier isn't as high as her persuasion, but it's still a decent amount. She has like a +5 to charisma, I think, at this point. Meanwhile, Sam and Sonia were like, okay, we're going to want to take care of the captain. He looks like he's really bulky. He looks like he's the toughest dude here. Let's try and take him out preemptively. So they enter his office, where he went back after Hazel started performing, and they start talking to him just a little bit, just, chit-chat, small talk. Meanwhile, Sonia's like, I'm going to sneak around. I'm going to kind of walk my way around back. I was like, all right. The captain kind of, notices you. He's kind of not sure what's going on. And Sonia's like, shoot, he's on to us. I hit him over the head. I said, all right, you trying to knock him unconscious? She's like, yep. I was like, all right. And I kind of like the idea of the surprise, so I said, all right, roll me an athletics check, kind of it'll be like a strength contest, kind of similar to grappling, and it'll be like your strength versus his constitution, and if you can beat it, then he goes unconscious. And I said, all right, now you're trying to basically knock him unconscious in one blow, so I'll give him advantage. He proceeds to roll like a 9 and a 10. Yeah, a 9 and a 10, in which Sonia rolls like a 12 and has some modifier in athletics. So I said, all right, you knock him out. And she's like, sweet. We'll hide his body underneath the desk. I'm like, okay, that works for me. Roll me like a stealth check as you try and, hide the body in a not so conspicuous manner. Like, all right, they rolled adequately. At which point I had a soldier kind of walk in the office being like, oh, oh, Captain, I heard a noise. Oh my gosh, what is going on here? And they're like, Sam's like, shoot, I shoot an arrow with entangle on it. I'm like, all right. He makes his roll. He hits. So I said, all right, you hit the guy. He's like in shock. Sonia's like, I sprint over and I go to do this. I go to like grapple him. I said, all right, roll me a strength. Now, because the guy was entangled and he had failed his strength save to kind of get out of it, I said, all right, he'll have disadvantage against your grappling, which I rolled. And once again, Sonia got her check, and she got him grappled. They're like, all right, I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm basically gonna hold him until I'm gonna choke him out. I said, all right, he gets one more, and once again, he's still entangled, so he gets its advantage. Sonia knocks him out. I said, okay, crap, what do we do now? And they're like, put him with the captain. I said, all right, and that's what they do. I said, roll me another stealth check. They roll it, and they rolled less. I said, you can see like this arm sticking out from the bottom of the desk. Like, we don't have time for this. At this point, they decide, all right, while Hazel's got the rest of the guards distracted, let's go and try and take out a cannon or two. That was one of our jobs, kind of. That's one way we can take out the fort. Disable the cannons. So I said, all right. So they go and they walk around, and I said, most of the guards are focused here, and they know you guys are supposed to be here, kind of, so they're all right with you guys kind of walking around a little bit. So they go up and they make it to I had basically 2 floors. You had the first floor with the ground floor with the little kind of courtyard, and then you had the wall surrounding it. That's where all the offices were and stuff. And then you had kind of a walkway that led up to the top, which is just really the rim of the fort with all the cannons. And they said, all right, let's go to all right. And they kind of looked at the map, and I had 2 cannons facing in towards the port. I had 3 cannons facing out to the seas, and I had 1 cannon facing out the other way where they had tried to sneak in. Now at this point, they're like, all right, we're going to roll a perception check. Kind of where's everybody's looking and gazing. I said, all right, and they rolled decently. I said, all right, there's a couple guys who are kind of focused out on the seas, but everyone's kind of, leaning against their cannon, listening into Hazel's performance because she rolled well. And they're like, all right, we're going to go to the side with just the 1 cannon, and we're going to while Sonia, knocks him out, I'm going to try and disable the cannon. I was like, all right. So Sonia's like, okay, I go over, stealth check. The guy sits there. He knows it's you, but he doesn't care. He's too busy listening. And she's like, all right. I got a successful stealth check. I was like, yep. She's like, all right. I choke him out. I said, all right. More strength check. She, of course, succeeds. And so they choke him out. They just kind of leave him there for the moment. And Sam's like, okay, how am I going to disable this cannon? And he thinks. And he spent about 2 minutes kind of coming up, him and Sonya kind of going back and forth. And finally, Sam's like, I want to take the spectral sword and I want to cut through the back of the cannon. That way when they fire a shot, it will blow the back out rather than fire out the front. I said, okay. And what was going through my head was, I didn't have a solution. I didn't give him a solution of how they were going to fix this cannon or anything like that. So, but I was like, Sam really wants to do this, and he feels invested, and he likes the fact that he's using what he has, and he's being resourceful and such. And I said, all right, if you can roll me a good strength check, a good athletics check to try and cut through this cast iron cannon, I'll let you do it. He said, all right. And of course he rolls a nat 20. I said, all right, you cut through. He's like, I'm not cutting through all of it. I want to leave just a little bit. That way they don't notice that it's been damaged. But at the same time, when they go to fire off a round, it blows the back out without any issue. I said, okay. So you leave just like a small sliver, just enough to keep the back attached, but without, but severely weakening the cannon. And Sam's like, yep. I was like, all right. And they're like, all right, we need to do it to the next one. I said, all right. And they go over and they go to the next one. Now I said, okay, now you got some issues because now there's more people kind of nearby. Sonia's like, okay, shoot. And they kind of sit there like, do we go for it? And they're like, I don't know. At which point I said, hear a crack of thunder. They're like, thunder? Why thunder? There's no storms. I said, you hear as you see a cannon shot explode into the city. And they're like, crap, it's dawn. It's time for the assault. They're like, shoot. At this point, I had the entire fort basically erupt into a frenzy as soldiers manned their cannons and stuff like that. And then Sam's like, oh shoot, okay, I don't know what to do. He's like, I'm gonna just start trying slicing cannons, like just stealth check and go slicing cannons. Hazel's like, I run up and I give bardic inspiration to Sam, and Sam's like, okay, and he rolls really poorly on his stealth check. He's like, shoot, and he's like, bardic inspiration. He rolls an 8 on his bardic inspiration, which I ruled was enough to beat my stealth DC. He's like, sweet, athletics check, and so he's like, can I help him? I was like, yeah, roll me advantage stealth athletics check. Sure enough, they cut partway through the cannon again, and they said we're doing the exact same thing. And they're like, all right, moving on to the next one. I basically had them moving along, and everyone's kind of in this huge frenzy. No one's really paying attention. Now, you can argue that this wasn't really realistic or anything like that. And you're right, it wasn't. The fact that there's a bunch of 3 strangers running around the top of a fort while everyone's trying to fire off a bunch of cannons is really ridiculous, an idea. However, the players were having fun. And I didn't mind, breaking away from kind of the rules of realism and such at the cost of the players' fun. I felt that they were enjoying what they were doing. They were literally laughing a lot of the time. Sam, who was very quiet and very, kind of shy, he was laughing. Like, Hazel and Sonia, they laugh all the time. But Sam was, like, cracking up. He was just having a blast as he gets a chance to use his spectral sword to cut through cannons and weaken them. Now they tried for a third cannon, and they did basically the same routine. However, even with bardic inspiration, they still failed the stealth check. At which point, the soldiers notice them kind of do what they're doing, and they're like, wait, what are you guys doing? Stop that! And they try and all fight them, and at this point, their guys are like, okay, crap, now it's initiative time. And I was like, yep, everybody roll initiative. And I entered into a combat, and I had, cannon shots from the Fitzherbert ships ricocheting into the fort, killing soldiers. I had, the 2 cannons they had weakened were fired off and exploded and severely damaged the guys manning those cannons. Plus, at the same time, the players were on a walkway, so there was only it was a pretty narrow walkway, only 10 feet wide. So the players really couldn't be get attacked by more than 1 or 2 enemies on each side. So they were able to kind of pull off a bit of a Thermopylae, with Sam and Hazel, manning one side and Sonia manning the other. And basically what they did is they just kind of moved their way down. They would kill a couple of guys. Sam would go for the cannon. I said, all right, Sam goes for the cannon. I said, it's going to take you 3 rounds if you roll successfully. At this point, they're like, well, heck with stealth. We just got to do it. And they managed to disable about 5 cannons before killing most of the guys in the fort just through sheer power. Because don't forget, Sonia's got an ability as a fighter that she can, if an enemy misses, with her AC of 21, she gets to basically attack them. Now, I was using mostly a power through numbers. Each enemy itself wasn't that hard, but there was 30 of them, so I said, alright, each of them's pretty weak, so Sonya can pretty easily wipe them out. And she did. She cut through them like a hot knife through cold butter. And at the same time, fortunately, Sam and Hazel were able to, kill a couple of their own. So it wasn't like Sonia was just killing everybody while Hazel and Sam do nothing. And after I said, after you kill about 20 of these guys, there's only about, a dozen or so left. They just drop their weapons and surrender. They say, you killed 20 of our guys, we're under siege, there's nothing we can do, half our cannons are screwed. And they just say, all right, we surrender. At which point the player characters are like, yes, and they just celebrate. They're just cheering, yes, we did it, we captured a fort. They're just having a blast at the idea that they got to capture an entire fort on their own. So they're like, all right, we disarm them. We're gonna lock them into the captain's office, and we're just gonna wait for our guys to show up. And I said, all right, you guys do that, and you wait. And about 30 minutes later, you hear a giant doo 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 on the front of the gates, and they're like, all right, open up. And sure enough, there's Admiral Yvonne with a couple of his officers being like, Great job, guys. Thank you for your help. You guys were a tremendous success. We have captured the port city of Dax'an. And I left it right there. The players were like, yes, we did it! They're having a great time. Sam's laughing. And while this session did kind of break some rules of reality, that kind of pseudo-realism we try and create in our games, the player characters were having a great time, and I really felt that's what was important. At the same time, I didn't mind, I'd been running a fairly quote-unquote realistic game. So I thought it was okay to kind of, let's bend the rules a little bit. Let's see how it goes. And I'm not sure I enjoyed it as much. Like, I think it could have been more fun if it was a little more serious and realistic. But again, the players had fun. And why else do we play D&D? So guys, thanks for tuning in this time. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you guys got something out of it. I guess you can say that it's okay to break reality if it means your players are having some fun, so long as it's not absurd, absolutely absurd. And you'll have to find that balance for yourself. I found a balance for my players, and hopefully you find it for yours as well. And again, thanks for tuning in. Like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. We'll see you next time. Stay cool.